guess I'm confident that I'll get a job. I think I'm a pretty outgoing person, and I think it has a lot to do with how you interview.
Being a junior and having older friends and seeing that they haven't gotten jobs, it's kind of discouraging to some people. It just kind of depends on what your field is.
Welcome to this afternoon's video conference on Major in Success. My name is Bob Greenberg. I'm the Director of Career Services at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. Today's format will be a lecture followed by a 20-minute question and answer session where the call-in audience will have the opportunity to ask questions and interact with our speaker. The purpose of the program today is to help students understand ways in which they can make a more successful transition from college and university to the world of their career. The phone-in number will appear during this introduction and then will also appear a couple of minutes prior to when we start taking questions and answers. Our speaker today is Mr. Patrick Combs. Patrick is a 1989 graduate in speech communication from San Francisco State University. Patrick graduated from San Francisco State, practiced a lot of what he preaches, and went immediately into a position of manager of video conferencing with the Levi Strauss Company, very major position. Approximately 3 years ago, Mr. Combs made another major transition. He became an author and speaker. He wrote the very successful book called Major in Success, and he speaks at approximately 40 college and university campuses across the country each year. And the topic is on how students can make this type of transition more successful. So with that, let me turn it over to Patrick Combs.
Thank you very much, Bob. Well, with that introduction, it makes me feel like I have to confess to all my weaknesses. Like I can't balance my checkbook, and my friends give me no respect. I want to talk with you today about college, about going to 4 years of college. And what you do, you go to 4 years of college, you try and get good grades, you try and major in something that you really care about. You get that degree, right? You put in all the work it takes to get that degree. And at the end of the process, what do you have? You have the same thing that millions of other college students have. You got a piece of paper. You got what one comedian called something about as valuable as a bowling trophy nowadays, right? So then the key question becomes, well, what can I do to separate myself out from the millions of college students who also got that piece of paper? That's what I want to talk with you about. I want to tell you a big moment for me in my career that made a big difference on my success. Bob mentioned that I worked for Levi Strauss & Company afterwards as a video conferencing manager. I want to tell you how I came to get that job once. I was at Levi, and I was an intern. And I was sitting across from my boss, and there he was talking to his associate, and he said, the company is putting me in charge of a video conferencing pilot test. And when he said that, I knew what he was talking about. Because at the time, my passion, what turned my crank, was video conferencing, because I loved high-tech toys, and this was the highest, the techiest toy that there was. This is $250,000 of equipment that allows you to do much like what we're doing right now, to hold a meeting live from Knoxville, Tennessee, to a city on the West Coast. And I heard him say that he was going to do a pilot test, and I wanted to be able to help on that in my job. Well, a bit of my childhood programming kicked in. I grew up in Bend, Oregon, a small town with a single parent who my mother got about as far as the 9th grade in her education. So my brother and I could ask her questions that she couldn't really answer. But she always had a great reply. She would always say, "That's a great question. Why don't you go look that up? That's what I bought the encyclopedias for." So we would. We didn't like it, but we got in the habit of looking things up. Well, I wanted to know more about video conferencing. So I went back to school. I was going to San Francisco State. I went in the library, and I started looking up articles about video conferencing. And I found, major geek, I found like 80 articles on video conferencing. I mean, I was in there for 4 evenings straight, about 3 hours per evening. I also found 6 books on video conferencing, and I photocopied all the key pages from the books. And then I put them all into a binder, and this binder got really, really thick. And then I took this binder to my mentor. This was a professor that I totally admired because of the things that she had accomplished in her career. And I took her the binder, and I said, Deborah, boy, you know, I would love to get to help on this video conferencing project out at Levi. I made this binder, and I don't know how to present it. What do I say? And she flips it open, and on the first page it said, Video Conferencing Binder by Patrick Combs. And she said, what is your boss's name? And I said, Dennis Chicola. She goes, well, then it's Video Conferencing Binder by Dennis Chicola. I was like, oh yeah? I didn't see him in the library. But she was teaching me politics. She was teaching me, that's what a mentor is for. She was teaching me that it would be easier for Dennis to show that binder off and to pass it on to his bosses if his name was on it. If my name was on it, if his intern's name was on it, well, he'd have to put that binder in his desk drawer because he doesn't want people to believe that his intern was doing more work than him. So I went to Dennis. This, mind you, this is only 5 days later. And I took this binder to him, and I put it on his desk, and I slid it over to him, and I never forget. He opened it, flips it open, starts looking through it, and looking through it, and then he looks up at me after a while, and he's smiling. And I'm thinking, yeah, good, all right. And then he looks through the binder more, and then he looks up at me again, and he smiles. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to get to help. And he says, well, you obviously have a lot of enthusiasm for video conferencing. Yeah. Tell me more, Dennis. And he said, and you apparently know more about video conferencing than anybody in the company. Yeah. Tell me I get to help. And then he goes, how would you like to be Levi Strauss & Company's video conferencing manager? I can pay you $25 an hour. And I was still a senior in college, and I was thinking, I was never been very good in math, and I was thinking, $25 an hour, I'm going to retire in 3 months. I was flipped. That was it for me. And that was a moment where I'd gotten my dream job, and I realized that it was possible to be very successful at an early age, right after you graduate, even right before you graduate. The biggest thing about that is I can't believe how much work I did in the library, because normally I'm just not that kind of person. And that was the first time that I'd been in the library for that long. But I read something that that says a lot about what it takes to be successful. I was reading this research out of the University of Chicago by a professor called Dr. Benjamin Bloom, and he took 120 outstanding college students. Some were outstanding artists, some were outstanding scholars, and others were outstanding athletes, right? So all different walks of life. And he wanted to know what makes these people outstanding. What attributes or characteristics do they have in common? Well, I grew up on a very ordinary street in a very ordinary town. And by 10 years old, I saw what ordinary looked like. Everybody on my block seemed to just have a regular, ordinary job. So at an early age, I realized, I know that I want an exciting job. I want something extraordinary. So I was reading this article, very anxious to discover what all successful people have in common. And it was good news to me, because the first thing it said was, they didn't have high IQ in common. I was like, cool. All right. And they did not have family background in common, which meant my mother didn't have to have stellar accomplishments in order for me to be successful. Good news. And they didn't have natural talent in common, and that was good news for me too. So I flipped the page, well, what is it? And the words stared back at me. Extraordinary drive. That's all they had in common. Extraordinary drive is all it takes to be successful. And I don't know what that does to you, but me, the guy who didn't turn in his final in the class Elements of Nuclear Physics, I had a good reason, because I was sleepy. But extraordinary drive seemed intimidating to me, because I thought extraordinary drive is when you wake up in the morning at 5 a.m. and you do 100 push-ups and then 100 sit-ups and then you eat a power breakfast and then you work and you use your time legitimately for 12 hours and then you do 100 more sit-ups and 100 more push-ups and then you go to bed. I thought, that's a person with extraordinary drive. Shoot! Does that mean I can't be successful? And then a wise person taught me a lesson that you saw on the screen. It was that extraordinary drive comes from doing what you love. That everybody is lazy at something. We all have lazy parts about us. But at the same time, there is something that you really like, that really gets you excited, that you have extraordinary drive for. There's some subject or some activity. So that's good news, because that means if you focus on what you love, then you're powered by extraordinary drive. Another thing that I've come to know about success is that there's no such thing as overnight success. I've never seen it. Success takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of steps. A lot of steps. I won't say it takes a lot of work, because when someone's doing something they love, you're not going to be able to get them to say it's work. They think of it as enjoyable. But it does take a lot of steps. Well, what powers a person through all those activities, up all those steps? Doing something you love. And when you're not doing something you love, you've seen it happen before. You're going up, you're trying to be successful, you're doing all those things it's supposed to take. You didn't like the job in the first place, and you run out of gas on the great highway of life, and you quit, you give up. Or you slack off, and that's called the midlife crisis. A lot of students, because they don't choose during college to aim for a job that they really love, are actually having quarter-life crises. At 25, they're feeling like, what am I doing? So I've become really clear on the fact that the only reason why I was able to go into a library and create a binder this thick full of photocopying was because I was doing something that I loved. I was focusing on a subject that made my heart rate go up, that I haven't had enormous enthusiasm for. If you had sent me in the library to look up articles about chemistry, I would have fallen asleep in the first hour and never woken up again. And what that says is, if you take someone who's listening to this video conference today and you say, who in here loves chemistry? And they raise their hand. They have drive for chemistry. And you put them next to me, I don't have drive, and we're both in a chemistry-related position for work. You tell me, who's going to get the promotions? Who's going to put in the extra effort? Who's going to be so excited about the job that they're getting to do that they take extra time to learn and to keep themselves innovative? The person who's focused on what they love. A lot of times, for students, you're convinced that you'd like to do something you love, but your parents want you to do something that's practical, that they consider to be more safe. One bit of advice, if that's your situation. You go to your parents and you say, I understand that you want me to be successful, and that's the concern here. I want myself to be successful too. The single greatest chance that I have in order to be successful is to focus on something that I have extraordinary drive for. Something that I'm going to see all the way through and do my very best at and do some extra on. Another reason for choosing work that you love while you're in school, making commitment to that, do you know how long a person works in their lifetime? Approximately 40 years. Do you know how much time is spent after college working? 70% of your time spent working after college. I think the other 30% goes to doing laundry. Right? So it's a lot of work. You want to enjoy the time while you're doing it. And then the other question that, of course, comes up is, you're convinced that you want to do something you love. Okay. How? What is it that you love? What for you would be your passion? And that's what I'd like to talk about next. You don't know what it is yet. Let's say you don't know what you have extraordinary drive for, what the thing that the job that you could focus on or the subject that you could focus on that would give you that kind of energy. I'll tell you 5 ways. And I believe these 5 ways are conclusive, that you're going to find your answer in one of them. The first one is go to the deepest part of your brain, the furthest corner, and admit what really, truly interests you. Because usually it's there. We've just added a lot of reasons on top to avoid it. The second one is how I found out what, for me, was my dream job. And it was to start writing about, listing all my talents, listing what I had enormous enthusiasm for, listing all the things I liked, and then listing all the possible opportunities I saw for myself. Maybe things that I wrote down things that I thought I might like to do, that sounded like they might be exciting to do. I wrote my strengths. I wrote my weaknesses. I wrote and wrote and wrote about everything I could think of, everything I knew about myself or wanted to know about myself for about 2 weeks. And I had a notebook. And what happens when you do this kind of writing process is you don't just instantly get your dream job. Some people do. But at the end of the process, you get a very clear, well-developed sense of what you would have extraordinary drive for. It starts to shake out. And you begin to go, that's who I am. That's what I would like to do. List all the things you should do. And then cross them off the list. Do the things you want to do. Another way to discover what you have extraordinary drive for is with a magazine rack. Go to the most well-stocked magazine rack in your city. And then when you're there, pick the 3 magazines that you'd like to read the most for fun. And sit down with those magazines and then ask yourself, what is it about this magazine that interests me? Because that says a lot about what you have a lot of enthusiasm for. The next one is to become aware of your enthusiasm. And this, to me, is as simple as, how do you know what you're enthusiastic about? Doesn't your body show you what you're enthusiastic about? Doesn't your heart rate go up? Don't you become more interested in something? Don't you have more energy to talk about it or more energy to listen about it? So it's just as simple as becoming conscious of what is going on with you physically. And then the last one is, if you're at the point where you still don't know, like you go through all those processes, you don't know what you're enthusiastic about, then what you can do for yourself is fuel your own fire. Because what that means is it may be a point in your career development where it's just time to say, I'm going to make a choice to be more enthusiastic. Because enthusiasm and motivation are very similar to building a fire. Okay? You start a fire. If you leave it be, if you don't touch it, if it's been neglected for a while, it goes out. But if you start a fire and then every day you throw another log on it, you throw another log, you throw some fuel on it, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's the same process with enthusiasm, with motivation sometimes. So what it might say is, if you just can't think of anything you're enthusiastic about, then help yourself be enthusiastic. Rekindle that fire by reading books. Read books about people who have done inspirational things. Read these wonderful personal development books that are inspiring about your career or about becoming successful. The other thing is, go to events that inspire you. Maybe it's a play. Maybe it's a rock concert, because music just inspires you. And it makes you feel like you want to be creative too. Do anything you can to fuel your own motivation and enthusiasm. And I really think that the bottom line on fueling your own fire is probably a conscious choice that simply says, you know, maybe I just need to make a choice that says, I'm going to live more enthusiastically, with more passion. I'd like to just make one quick comment now on where you go from there. After you've identified what it is that you have enthusiasm for, the best starting place in your college career is to choose it as a major. The big question is, what do you choose for a major? The myth is that it's a life-defining choice, that when you pick your major, it's going to determine your career for 40 years. And it's not. You know, the hardest thing in the world is to find someone after college who is doing work that is in their major, that's related to it. Because most of the time, you'll change and you'll shift around. Your major will end up having very little to do with what you go on to do in your career. That's good news, because that means you major in whatever it is that you're most enthusiastic about so that you have a better time in college, and you back it up with 5 simple things, and I'll leave you on these points. No matter what you major in or who you are, to be employable, you have to be able to do these 5 things. You have to be able to write a memo, so you take a business writing course. You have to be able to do fundamentals on a computer, so you learn how to word process database and use a spreadsheet. You have to know how to answer a phone professionally, so you get in a campus club and you get practice. You have to be able to work with others in teams, and you have to be able to manage multiple tasks. So you do something so that when you go in the interview, you show evidence of that. You take care of those 5 things, and you can major in anything. And we'll see you at part 2. Thank you.
I have a lot of friends from undergrad who they're either one or two things. They're incredibly anxious because they have no major job and they thought their bachelor's was going to do the job, or they majored in something very specialized in their undergrad and they're soaring in their job area, like such as engineering or journalism or something that put them there. So they're either incredibly anxious because they're not in the area they're in, they're doing desk jobs that completely bore them to tears, or they're doing great. And it just depends on I think your amount of your intensity on doing what you really want to do. And if you really want to do what you want to do, you can do it. You just got to put some effort into it. You can't just go to school and expect it to come to you.
I couldn't agree more with what that person just said, especially about the part that it really boils down to if you want to do it and you get started, then it comes true. Somebody said to me over the phone recently when we were talking about my career, they said, "Patrick, it comes down to what do you want to do and what are you willing to do to get there?" And I couldn't believe more in those 2 as the bottom line. I wanted to add, to pick up at the end of part 2, or at the end of part 1 there, and talk with you now about, okay, you know what you're enthusiastic about. You know what turns your crank. Then how do you know how do you know how to turn that into a job? How do you know what jobs to do? For instance, what if your love is philosophy? Don't people say, "Oh, you're in trouble, you majored in philosophy. What are you going to do with that?" Guess what? If you go in your career center, there is a book called Major Options. This book is wonderful. If you're a history major, you open the book, and in the front part it lists all the different majors there are, and you'll find a history major, and you read through it, it tells you all about your major, what to expect from it, and then at the end it lists 18 jobs that need history majors, that need people who have enthusiasm for history. Then you flip to the second half of the book, and it gives a detailed description of those jobs, what you can expect from those jobs, and a starting point for how to get into those jobs. Now, more and more when I walk into a bookstore, try this for yourself. Go into a bookstore and go to the section on career development. And more these days, there are books like that. There's a series of books that says, jobs for history majors, jobs for English majors, jobs for philosophy majors. That's the ticket to connecting what you have enthusiasm for to real jobs. I wish I knew in college that these books were available, and I didn't. The other thing is beyond that, and about looking in books, see, when most people think to go to look for a job, they think to look in the newspaper. Did you know that 85% of jobs that are available for you are not advertised in the newspaper? If you look through the newspaper, you're just going to see the same old jobs all the time. It's going to seem to you like there are about 5 jobs in the world, and they're like Kinko's, McDonald's, administrative assistant, and temping. I mean, it's not very inspiring. That's why you go to the books to discover where they are. Now, beyond going to the books, there's another way. You start asking everywhere. You just ask people. Ask your professors. When someone comes to speak at your campus, go up and ask them afterwards. Hey, this is what I'm interested in. And you think of any jobs that might be related to that. In your community, a lot of times, there are career seminars, there are career workshops, there are job seekers who get together to network and to brainstorm. If you go to these events and you ask people, does anybody know of a job that would need me? and you tell them what you're enthusiastic about, that's where you discover all the different kinds of jobs there are. The thousands of very creative, interesting jobs that you never, ever heard about. So that's how you make the tangible link. And I can tell you, if you know that you're enthusiastic about something, but you can't think of a job for it, you just haven't asked enough places. Because there's a job for it. As a matter of fact, there are probably 20 jobs for whatever you're thinking that you might be very happy in. Your job is to discover them. Beyond that, then the question becomes, you've identified the job that you would love to have. What do you have to do to get it? And I'd like to tell you that, I told you how I got my job. I told you how I got my video conferencing manager's job at Levi. Well, that was the easy part, because I had to do things just to get into Levi, just to be there at that internship sitting across from my boss when he brought that up. And I'd like to, let me tell you how I got to that position. I was a sophomore at San Francisco State University, and a guest speaker came to our classroom, and he told us about where he worked. His name was Dr. Robert Johansen, and he worked at the Institute for the Future. I thought that sounded cool. Oh, that sounds great. And I decided, well, I would like to do that for summer work, because I'd heard it was good to do something like an internship for the summer. So I decided to call him. Mind you, I did not have very much experience speaking professionally over the phone, just with friends. And I was nervous when I called him. I was more nervous because he had 3 doctorates. 3. One from Harvard, one from Yale, and one from Princeton. As if 2 isn't enough. So I called him up, and I was in my dorm room, and I had the phone, and I was pacing back and forth, while I was waiting for him on the line. And then he came on the line. Well, I was so nervous that I paced too far this direction, and the phone was connected to this wall, and it jerked the phone out of my hand, and I turned, and I just watched this phone receiver in slow motion bounce across the floor, and then who I thought of as Dr. Robert Johansen hit the wall, and so did my chances for him hiring me. So I had a backup plan, and I went to it, to be a janitor for the summer. So I was a janitor. Well, the next year, I tried for a lesser internship, and I got it. That says a lot about me. And I got this rinky-dink internship at a place called Ron Ran Advertising. But it came back around to the springtime, and I decided I'm going to try again to get this at the Institute for the Future. Right? Never say die. So I did it. I called him this time, and I got an interview with Dr. Robert Johansen. And I got to tell you, I wish I hadn't. Because it went so miserable. I was so unprepared for that interview that I look back and feel like, well, it seems like I just went there to say in person, I just wanted to show you I'm an idiot in person. It was, so it didn't work. And I was desperate because my backup plan again was to be a janitor. Well, this time I went to my mentor and I said, Deborah, okay, I get it. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to do this. I need your advice now, and I know that I haven't taken all of it in the past, but I will now. You tell me what to do. I just want to get some kind of decent employment. I don't want to be a janitor. So my mentor kicked in. She goes, okay, grab your pen. And I started writing. She goes, then the first thing you need to do is you need to go in the library. You need to look up articles about Levi Strauss & Company, photocopy them, because you're going to take them to the interview. I was like, okay, I will. Where's the library? And then the next thing, she's like, okay, then you need to, she goes, you need to up your resume. It's not good enough. It needs to be better. You need to go to the Career Center. You need to let them help you make one that will get you into the job. She goes, have you been in a campus club? I said, yes, I'm in the advertising club. She goes, you need to put that on there. And then she showed me how to write it up so it looked very impressive. Made my resume. She goes, you need to do another thing. You need to have a show and tell item. You need something when you go in the interview that shows the employer that you're not just interested, you're experienced. So she helped me figure out what that would be. For me, I managed a rock and roll band on the side while I was in college. And I had made them a cover letter and a little promotional kit to get them into clubs. So she said, take that. And then the last thing she told me, and it was like a secret, is she said, join a professional association. It's like, what's that? And she said, well, you're applying in the Public Relations Department. So why don't you join the Public Relations Society of America? That is probably the same professional club that the person you're interviewing with is in. If you do that, they will think of you as a semi-pro, as kind of, ahead of the curve. So I did it. Well, that was the most work I'd ever done, actually, for preparing for a job interview or something extra beyond my classes. And I did it all, and it paid off. Get this. 140 people from all over the country applied for this internship at Levi Strauss & Company. And then they called me, and they said, congratulations, you made the top 40. Now, we can't interview 40 people, so we're going to call you next week. We're only going to interview 6, and we'll let you know if you'll be one of them that we interview. So I waited, and I waited to see if they would call me. And then they did. And I said, hi, how'd I do? And they said, you did great. You did really, really great. And we encourage you to apply again next year, because you were really close. Really close. I couldn't believe what I was hearing over the phone. And I started having these flashes of being a janitor again. So I said, please, please, you don't understand. Please don't hang up on me. I'm serious. I need this so bad. I was counting on this so bad. I put so much work into preparing for this interview. And I want to work there, so please don't hang up on me. I really want this. I need this. I'll have to be a janitor if I don't get this. And guess what? Begging works, because she let me in. She let me in. She squeezed me into the interview. I have no shame, but I got an interview. Well, when I got the interview, it went fantastic. When she said, one of the first questions she asked me was, why do you want to work at Levi Strauss & Company? And I said, because it's a company I love. As a matter of fact, whenever I see an article about Levi Strauss & Company, I photocopy it and I save it. And I reached down in my bag and I pulled out these articles and I showed them to her. And she looks at them and she looks up at me like, get a life. And then the next question was, well, why do you want to work in the Public Relations Department? And I said, because I'm very interested in public relations. I manage a rock band on the side, and that's public relations. I have to use let me show you. And I reached my bag and I showed her the band management kit. And that got me, that boosted my chances for the job there. She liked that. Well, we went on. She looked at my campus club experience, and she said that she thought that demonstrated leadership. And then she looked at that internship that I'd done, the rinky-dink one. It was still a plus. She got down to that last line, that I was a member of the Public Relations Society of America. And she was like, you're a member of the Public Relations Society of America? So am I. Do you know Robert Johnson? I thought, Robert? Yeah, I think so. It was tremendous. All of a sudden, she treated me at a whole different level, almost like I was an insider. And you know what? I got the job. And not only did I get it, but I was later told that I was the third person they interviewed and the last person they interviewed. And to me, that taught me, that made me a believer of the things that make you stand out. So that you stand out and you're not just one of millions of people who have a piece of paper. And they're what I call the Big Five. They are to get yourself a mentor. How could I have even gotten that job without my mentor telling me all the right moves? As a matter of fact, my mentor is the one who told me the internship was even available. The second one is a campus club. The campus club helped me a lot in just plain getting into the interview. If it hadn't been on my resume, I don't think my resume would have been strong enough to even get me in there. I've interviewed so many people for writing my book about recent college graduates who did very well for themselves. And what you're looking at is what they all had in common, what they all did during college. And they were all in campus clubs and swore by them as one of the most rewarding activities that they did. The other thing is the computer skills. And let me just tell you what happened next in my interview, in my internship. All internships, they're part-time work. They usually are 20 hours a week, and ideally they're 20 hours a week. I'll give you an interesting statistic. If during your college education you work less than 20 hours a week, your grades are likely to decline. If you work more than 20 hours a week, your grades are likely to decline. If you work 20 hours a week, your grades are likely to go up. It's an ideal balance between work and experience. Well, all internships end. They're 20 hours a week. They're usually for a month or for 2 months. And mine did too. I was lucky because I got into this prestigious company. I encourage you to aim for prestigious companies too, because they treat you very well. And it's the reward you get when you do these kind of 5 activities that we'll look at here in a minute. But when mine ended, normally I would have had to go away. But because I could use a computer, pick up 3 computer skills for yourself. Be able to word process, be able to use a database, and be able to use a spreadsheet. Because if you can do those 3 things, you are valuable in the corporate world. More valuable than you ever imagined. You have Fortune 500 managers out there who are scared to death of computers. Because I wasn't. I would be working on the computer there. My boss would come by, treat me like the boy wonder, and go, "What are you doing?" I don't know how you work that thing, and be like, "Yeah, I'm about to print." It was like, I was just word processing. Well, because I could do that, they upped my salary from $6 an hour to $12 an hour, and I came back there as a contractor for Levi over my Christmas break. That's how I happened to be around Levi at the time that I heard about video conferencing. So going back to that list of the big 5, pick up computer skills for yourself while you're in campus or while you're in school. And when you need to know about your career, when you need to know about the job that you're aiming for, you need to go into the library and look it up for yourself, because you're not going to get as much information from your professors. You're going to find very great, exciting, rich information when you go into the library. And then the last one you're seeing up there is the biggest, the biggie, numero uno, and it's do an internship. It's don't even think about graduating without an internship. I don't know if you know, but doing one internship is a requirement to a college career. Don't do one internship, you're not going to get a job. It's a minimum requirement too. The good news is, if you do 3 internships while you're in college, I've yet to meet a person who has done 3 internships and has not gotten a great job. It's the absolute ticket to a great job afterwards. Internships are like driver's training. It's like getting behind the wheel and actually getting a feel for the road. Like getting out of the classroom and away from the driver's training book and, shifting the gears and putting your foot on the pedal. So internships are absolutely essential. I'm going to tell you about 4 other things that you can do beyond the big 5. You can join a professional association. Let me tell you another way in which it can help you. If there are some seniors listening, they're going, I'm behind. I didn't do those 5 things. I'm going to graduate soon. What do I do? Do an internship after you graduate anyway. And the second thing is just join professional associations. When I wanted to become a public speaker, I joined a professional association called the National Speakers Association of America. For any career that is being thought of in this teleconference, there is a professional association, and you can find it by looking it up in a book called the Encyclopedia of Associations. If you look it up and you join it and you attend some of their meetings, your understanding of what you need to do in your career is going to go through the roof. You're going to network with people that can hire you, and your excitement level for your career is going to go up too, because you're in it and you're surrounded by it for 3 days at one of these conferences. Then the next thing that you can do for yourself is the idea of show and tell items. And let me just say about show and tell items. If you're in a campus club, it might be a flyer that you worked on. It might be a poster that you worked on for an event you did. It might be the business plan that you put together to run your club. It might be the the newsletter that you generate for the organization. If you're in an internship, it's just plain going to be the things that you were assigned to do while you were on your internship. If you're in a class that's related to your major, then it may be a paper that you did that's very specific to the career you're going to go into. Hang on to them, refine them, make them better, so that at the time when you go looking for a job, and you go scrambling for a show and tell item, you have it on file and it's ready to go. Another thing is called informational interviewing. Let me explain an informational interview just through a story about a guy I know in San Francisco named David Green. David Green graduated from San Francisco State University. He graduated with a business major, And then a year later, he was selling shoes. And he didn't like it. So somebody told him about informational interviewing. They said, you know, what you can do is you can pick up the phone and you can call any company you like. And you can say, hi, you know, my name is Patrick Combs, and you're in a career that I would really like to learn more about. I was wondering if you would help me out by letting me come in for a 10 to 15 minute informational interview. 90% of the time they'll say yes. You know why? Because they want to talk about their job. Because they want to take 10 to 15 minutes off their job to show you around. And because they want to give back. For you, what does it do for you? An informational interview for you, just like it did for David Green, is all of a sudden you're in a company, you're seeing exactly what the job is really like. This saves people 20 years of agony sometimes, thinking they want to do something, going in an informational interview and going, I don't want to do that. So it gives you a real-world reality check, and you're networking. You're there, you're putting a face to your name, and you're getting business cards. And there's one other benefit, and it's a benefit that David Green got, and sometimes it happens. See, most students won't go on an informational interview, and when you do, you stand out to employers. And they'll offer you a job sometimes. And David Green got offered a job while he was there. He informational interviewed at a company that makes CD-ROMs, interactive music ones. His favorite rock band in the world is Aerosmith. He did the informational interview there. They liked him. They invited him to stay. He never left the company. A year later, they got the contract to do Aerosmith's CD-ROM, and he was in charge of the project. All of a sudden, he's making the Aerosmithsonian CD-ROM because he did an informational interview. The other suggestion for you while you're in college is, you want a great job? You want a great internship? Want to know how to get one? Well, you can go to your Career Center and you can look it up in books. You can, the Career Center has directories. Internships 1994, America's Top 100 Internships, the National Directory of Internships. Or you can go to your chairperson of your major, or you can call on alumni. All those things. And believe me, those books that I just mentioned are fantastic. You just go through there, you look up companies, or you just flip it open randomly and read about the internship and you get ideas. But there's another way to do it that I believe very strongly in. I didn't make it up. There was a young man named Steve. He's living in Florida, 19 years old. His favorite thing, his enthusiasm, video games. Right? So he's playing John Madden football, and he decides, you know, I need to do something productive with my summer. And he flips open the game box, and on it says Electronic Arts, the company that makes it, in California. So he picks up the phone, and he calls. He goes, do you have an internship? Do you have any internship programs? I don't know. You'd have to talk to so-and-so. Well, he gets passed around 5 times on the phone before someone at the company knows that they do have an internship program. And then he applies. He applies and gets the job testing video games for the summer. $12 an hour to play John Madden football and tell him what he thinks. Not only that, they flew this young man, they paid for his flight round trip from Florida to California and his condo for the summer. You know why they do that for you? Because there's a dividing line in our society. There are people who hope for a good job, they cross their fingers, and they're just open. But they don't want to put out extra effort for it. I mean, it's enough that they're just doing their schoolwork and getting their degree. But then there are people who step to this other side of the line. On the other side of the line is people who are determined to do something exciting and willing to do some that's extra. And they'll never go back to the other side, even though there's extra effort involved, because the world gives you everything when you're the kind of person on this side of the line willing to do a little bit extra. Everything. When that young man called, you know, and he demonstrated that he had done the big 5 things while he was in school, that he was the kind of person that would do a little bit extra, a company doesn't want to let go of you like that. Because from companies' perspectives, it is very difficult to find good employees, to find someone who will do something extra. When people say, and you read it all the time, it's a very difficult job market out there. I think it's a very difficult job market out there for people who just want to get by. It's a very, very fun, wonderful, rewarding place for people who want to do the kind of things that I just suggested. You don't even have to do them all. You just take a handful of them and do them and watch what they do for your career. And you'll never go back, as they say. I'd like to tell you, close on on the story, I met a young woman named Veronica Chambers. Veronica Chambers is the top story editor of New York Times Magazine at 23 years old. So I called her. She was in Glamour Magazine, is a successful person, and I called her and asked her, what did you do during college to get to here? And she said, well, you know, I was in my freshman year, and I wanted to be a writer. But I thought you had to be ordained to be a writer, so I decided to be a lawyer. Sounded more practical. But then my friend was doing an internship at a magazine. She was obviously having so much more fun than I was. So I decided I wanted to do an internship at a magazine, but I didn't know anybody. I hadn't taken any writing courses. So I didn't, she goes, so I did the only thing I could think to do. I grabbed the New York City phone book, I opened it up to magazines, and I started calling. And I called every magazine and heard a no. We don't have any internships available until I got to the S's. And at the S's, I got Sassy Magazine, and they said, you want to work for free? Come on down! And she got an internship at Sassy Magazine. And once she got an internship at Sassy Magazine, she got an internship at Life Magazine, and then at People Magazine, and then at Premiere Magazine. By the time she was done with college, Veronica Chambers did 5 internships. Sound impossible? When you count how much time you have in college, actually it's not. You do it over, you do 3 of your summer breaks on an internship, and 2 of them on your winter breaks, or maybe during a semester. You got 5 under your belt. And she graduated into into a position that 40-year-olds often don't accomplish from going after it. So, yeah, the world is your oyster if you'd like to make it. And these are the activities that qualify you for your job, guaranteed that employers are looking for. You do these things and you match the list of employer wants. So let's take a break, and then we'll see you back at part 3. Thank you. Bye-bye.